So, good day, everyone. We're here for another episode of the DVD show. So, for today, we have the host of the Navs Effect podcast, and he's also a reporter for Rappler, and he also writes a ton of stuff about the Miami Heat. And you guys should follow him on Twitter or X now because any UAAP or Miami Heat news or NBA news, you'll see it on his account. I'll now welcome here on the DVD show, Naveen Ganglani. Thank you for joining me here on the podcast.
No, thanks for having me, Diego. I appreciate it, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited for the UAP season and ready to go.
Yeah, yes. Starting off with the UAAP, you mentioned it already. I invited Naveen here to talk about the UAAP and we give a preview to you guys on the 8 teams for men's basketball and what to expect from the league now in the 86th iteration of the UAAP. So, and to start things off, Naveen, and I saw you in the press conference of the UAAP. So, what were the out of everything that was said, what were the couple of things that stood out from you in that press conference?
Hmm. It was actually an unusual press con. Well, not unusual, but out of the ordinary. It was definitely a
Mm-hmm.
longer press conference than what's been the case the last few years, in part because this time around the women's basketball teams were included, which I think is a great move for the league and for sports in the Philippines moving forward. But then also, there were other aspects of the press conference that focused more on the streaming services, the officiating, the use of AI in the future, possibly for the UAP, and other areas more towards the UAP that the league will present to the fans, but not so much about the teams, I would say. I think in part because you don't really get a lot of big inside information in these press conferences because the questions sometimes can be ranged from, oh, what's your team like, which team is the
Yeah,
best strongest team contender, which is what happens
yeah.
every year. And because this is a question that's asked every season during the press conference,
Mhm.
um, coaches don't know what to respond. Coaches know what to say. They say, "Oh, we're only focused on the game ahead." Like Coach Pido making jokes was funny though. He was saying
Yeah,
that he was bringing the comedic aspect to it.
yeah.
Um, but it was really to some degree the same old, with the exception, of course, of the inclusion of the women's teams, which again I think is great. And that's basically it.
Yeah. How about with the press con? Since you said it's the same old process or protocol, do you think that they should do something like in the next couple of seasons to make it more exciting, or is it just really going to be like that every year? Because isn't it like something like media day or something like in the NBA? Or yeah, do you think it's just really going to be like this, wherein they ask the same questions, but it's also like the cliche answers?
Well, I don't think it's up to the UAAP to fix anything. I think it's up to what kind of the people who are asking the questions to provide something different, I would say.
Mhm.
Because in recent years, the press conferences are always fun. It's something to always look forward to. I am always excited the days leading up to the press conference
Mhm.
because it's like the ultimate, okay, the UAP's back event that's happening, right?
Yeah.
So I think it really, not that's not to say that the questions this press conference were bad. Some were actually pretty good,
Mhm.
including there were questions about what's the league going to do with officiating, and that's where we
Yeah.
got information such as unsportsmanlike fouls and technical fouls will be reset after the elimination round, which I think might have big implications when it comes to suspensions and player availability. Because if you remember in the NCAA last season, Fran Yu was suspended for that
Yeah.
game three. This is NCAA, but this is just an example. No,
Yeah. It
Letran
might
still won.
happen.
Yeah, Letran still won that game, but of course,
Yeah.
Fran Yu's was an important player.
Mhm.
Then there was also the question about what the UAP will do with the increased presence of betting websites and betting sponsors, and that's where we got information such as the officials for the UAAP will be exclusive just to the UAAP, and the officials, the league feels that the quality of the officiating will be fair and good. So that's not to say that the questions were boring. No, and there were some intriguing questions, but of course also um, questions such as coaches, what do you think of your team? Coaches, who's the strongest team that you feel you're going to deal with? These are questions that the coaches are prepared for, and they won't really give like an answer. And the fact now that we had 16 coaches present instead of 8 because of the women's basketball teams just made that process longer. The
Yeah,
press conference was longer, but honestly, like not really a lot to complain about. It's a press conference, it's a media day kind of event. And there were still parts that were fun, always fun to see players. There were less players this time around per team compared to
true.
past seasons.
Yeah.
When talking about men's basketball, because now the
Mm.
women's basketball players were also present and the coaches, so it evened out. But other than that, everything else was really the same.
Yeah, you mentioned the press conference, and me also. I went there also to experience it because I'm excited for UAAP. And you mentioned it's the like springboard to opening day this weekend for the UAAP. So I know that you were watching and you also covered some of the preseason um, games of these schools, and you actually interview them and also write about them on your social media accounts. So I wanted to ask you about the team. So syempre we'll start with Ateneo since they're the defending champions, and but then they lost 4 out of their 5 starters. So what intrigues you the most heading into season 86 for the Ateneo?
Coach Tab summarized it really well in the press conference when he said this team will be characterized, speaking of the Blue Eagles, his team will be characterized by growth rather than experience because there are a lot of new faces in the Ateneo Blue Eagles roster. And those who have been in the team last season, 2 seasons ago, these are the same players that will now have bigger roles and will have to take on a larger chunk of the responsibility. So you mentioned a couple of notable names that are no longer with Ateneo. So Ange Kwame, we all know how good he is. UAP MVP, one of the best players to ever play in the UAP. Some people say he's the best ever. He's an anchor on both sides of the floor. Ateneo also lost a 3 and D player in BJ Andrade, who was pretty important. David Defonso, he wasn't very efficient in some big games, but
Yeah,
he was still a creator. I thought he was an underrated rebounder, and he was someone you could give the ball to and he could penetrate, which I think is an important quality for any team to have. And of course, for Padriga, we also have to mention that he's no longer with the Blue Eagles, and he was the MVP runner-up last season. He was important for the team too in terms of setting the table in offense, hitting outside shots, and providing quality production too. He was also good defensively. He did a good job, creating turnovers for the opposition, for Ateneo rather, from the opposition. So, how will the Blue Eagles make up for these losses? Joseph Obasa, we saw how good he was developing during the preseason as the games went by. I think that Mason Amos is going to be a very good player for Ateneo this season too. I think Kai Balunga is going to have a big year for Ateneo. I think the same for Chris Kuhn. So there's still a lot of talent. I think Gab Gomez is going to step up with a larger responsibility now for the Blue Eagles. And there are some talented, young faces and players in the team. Credo, the Cebu kid. As, I'm trying to remember.
Shankin.
Sean Tevis also will be very important. My question with Sean is, will he be able to play, you know, um, in optimal Sean way because he's still recovering from injury? But he says
Oh,
he
okay.
should be ready in time. So let's see how that plays out. Of course, I think we can expect big things from LeBron Nieto, one of the rookies of
Mhm.
Ateneo. He's going to have a game this season where he's going to hit like three pointers in a quarter, and it's going to help Ateneo win the game. And he is a stellar young player. I think Kyle Gamber, I'm interested to see how he develops because there were some signs of he came late in the offseason for Ateneo. He didn't really join the Blue Eagles early in their preseason campaign. So let's see how quickly he gets adjusted to the system. And overall, it's a talented team. I think it's still a contending team. whether or not they win the championship will be determined by how quickly the guys facing larger responsibilities can live up to those responsibilities. But I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with still.
Yeah, talking about Ateneo, there's a lot of names that people might not be familiar with from the names that you mentioned. But in the Phil Oil, they had a tough campaign in the Phil Oil tournament, which was around May or June. But they won a couple of leagues like Phil Basket and Pinoy Liga. So, what did you see from their game, whether offense or defense, that really changed? Since you mentioned that Coach Tab's really focusing on growth with these young core.
I think they're still the usual Coach Tab Baldwin team. They're good on defense. They provide effort. They're disciplined. They move the ball on offense. They have a lot of shooters in this team. One more guy I should mention is Jared Brown,
Oh yeah.
who I think was impressive in the offseason as well. And he is another guy with a quick trigger and can hit 3 point shots. By the way, Rafi Celis, the standout for Ateneo from Cebu, who I think was very impressive in the offseason, and he will be someone to watch out for. Josh Lazaro, another name we should mention. Sean Toano, also another new guy on the roster who's long and can play well, and he can contribute on both sides of the floor. So it's a loaded roster. It's a lot of talent. Again, it's just a matter of making it all come together, because I would say that this roster, the guys have experience playing in the off season, but the UAAP basketball game is different, especially when you consider how compressed the UAAP schedule is. Some teams will be playing like 3 games in a 7 day span. So can you keep healthy during that span? Can you keep your mental concentration during that span? And can you mesh with your teammates right away? I mean, not right away, but in a quick amount of time to contend when the Final Four arrives. The Eagles of season 85 was able to do that, in part because they did have a lot of veterans in the team. So that's what's maybe not so present aside from Kuhn and Balungay, who are, like in their third and second years in the season respectively. What kind of veteran presence will be like there as a safety net for Ateneo? That's my question right now for the team. But I still expect them to contend for a championship.
Yeah. Speaking of Ateneo, I'd be interested since in the you mentioned they had a lot of veterans last year and they would really pull out games because of their experience last year. But would you say that now their rotation, especially in the first round, would be more than the usual 8 to 9 guys that Coach Tab would focus on like last year? Do you think he'd play like 11 to 12 guys now to try to find the rhythm? I'm not sure how they played when it was in the off season leagues.
I think in the early few games of the season, you're going to see some experimentation from Coach Tab Baldwin to kind of see what's going to stick and what's going to work. Now, in the off season, I found it also rather impressive how there were sequences where he was playing LeBron Nieto and Jared Brown clutch minutes.
Mm-hmm.
With this roster, I feel Coach Tab is going to go with what's working. So there's no set rotation in stone yet, meaning these are my 8 guys I'm going to rely on. Right, from the first round, maybe till the early second round, you're going to see him see which is sticking, which lineups are working well with each other, which players have good chemistry in the court, which guys can pick up the defensive and offensive game plans of opponents fast so that he knows which guys to put in there. Take note that Coach Tab likes utilizing high IQ basketball players.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel the players who can catch up quickly, not only to what Ateneo wants to do as a team, but also what the opponents are doing against them. Those are the guys who you're going to see get playing time down the stretch of games. And I feel like we're going to see a number of games this season where Ateneo, particularly against the other elite teams, NU, LaSalle, UP, where you're going to see Ateneo in like tight late game situations, and how the team performs in those kinds of situations early in the season will probably determine which players Coach Tab will rely on later on when the games get more important.
Yeah. You mentioned about execution toward the latter part or like the clutch situations. How do you think Ateneo is gonna manufacturer points toward the latter part? Like, would you say they'd have a go-to guy like Balungay, or would it? And because like whenever it's go time, like how Milwaukee didn't have someone like that, that's why they got Damian Lillard now as like their number one guy in the clutch. Who do you think Ateneo is gonna go to at the those situations, or what kind of approach would they have if it's not only like one guy?
I think it's really going to be by committee in the early segments of the season, because based from the off season, with the way they were sharing the ball, the way they were looking for the open man. So if, for example, LeBron Nieto's going to be open from the corner for a three, he's going to get the ball and he's going to have the green light to shoot it. If Rafi Celis has a nice cut from the baseline
Mm-hmm.
and no one is there to guard him in the dunker spot, he's going to get an easy layup. Kai Balunga is another guy from mid range that's going to be deadly. So they have a lot of options. I think they're going to figure out early what's going to work and what might be their bread and butter place, and then figure it out from there.
Okay, yeah, that's I also see that because I'm not sure also what to expect from Ateneo and any coach tab team, especially if the players are unknown to the casual fans. They might just surprise everyone and still finish number one in the elimination round. You never know. But before we segue to the second place team, which was UP, I'd want to ask you, since Ateneo is still the defending champion, and you said a lot of positive insights about their off-season preparations, even if they lost four starters. What are, if there are any couple of things do you think that they have an advantage over or edge over UP? What would those be heading into the season?
An edge over UP for Ateneo.
Yeah.
Well, it's also worth noting that I feel like Ateneo and UP are in the same boat when it comes to having a lot of new faces on the roster, because we also have to take into consideration that a lot of the guys playing for UP this season are newcomers to the UAAP as well. So, to some regard, it's going to be an arms race for Ateneo and UP in terms of which of the young new players in the team can adjust to the UAAP style right away. Where UP might have an advantage over Ateneo is that UP has the vets on their team who have been through a lot of battles. Same Ateneo, same with Balungay and Gomez and Kuhn. UP, Kagulangan, Malik, Cancino.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, now that I think about it, they're pretty even in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching, I do think that Coach Tab Baldwin right now, because of the success, because of the championships he's won, he
Mm-hmm.
is, you have to consider him the best coach in college basketball right now, just by the
Yes.
virtue of the results. But then I wouldn't also say that Coach Goldwyn would be outmatched against Coach Tab,
Mm-hmm.
because we've seen Coach Gold and Coach Tab, coach their teams fairly equally over the last two seasons, each team winning one championship each. So right now, I think it's too early to tell what Ateneo's advantages over UP, what UP's advantages over Ateneo, because we still haven't played any games.
Yeah, this is a hard question. I just wanted to ask it to you because I know that people would think that UP is the favorites heading into the season because of their talent, and they practically blew out LaSalle and Phil Oil. So it was a hard question, but I knew that it would be hard to answer. So it's fine that you said that. But heading into the UP team, I know that people have a lot of also questions, even if they're talented, because you could only play five guys at a time, and there were questions on like they have LeBron, they got Francis Lopez, and he would play only like 20 to 25 minutes or whatever other questions, or Luis Pablos like MVP in the NCAA juniors, but he might not, their games he might not get minutes for UP. So based from what you've been seeing, how do you see Coach Goldwyn like on like mixing up all these egos and like eliminating it and making them all selfless? Because I think it's been working so far, but as you said, it's still a different animal when it's the UAAP.
A lot of college players, no matter how good you were in high school, when you reach the college level, the high school players immediately realize that the level of competition is different, because your teammates with other players who were also the best of their high school teams, and you're facing opponents from other teams who were also the best high school players of their respective team. So if you're a superstar in high school, if you're an MVP, or what your role was, when you get to college, it could totally change. right? And then again, it will change when it comes to the pros because these are different levels. One thing with UP, I will say, is Coach Goldwyn has always done a good job balancing out the minutes and the rotations of his players so far in the 2 seasons. He's been the head coach of the Fighting Maroons. And I think he's going to do that again this season, particularly when you take into account how he was handling the team during the off season. So, guys, you're not going to see like one guy get a whole lot of minutes. Like for example, last season, Zave Lucero, there are 40 minutes in a UAP game. Zave Lucero averaged about 24.
Mhm.
Tamayo, I'd have to double check, but I'm guessing wasn't like above 30. So
Yeah.
balance and the distribution is there. And UP knows that arguably their biggest strength is their depth, their talent, and their depth. And they're going to try to take advantage of that as much as possible.
Yeah, with what you saw with UP, like in Phil Oil, I got surprised in Mark Belmonte. I think he played well in against LaSalle. And there are other players that like Chico Briones was the one in the press conference. So people are expecting big things from him. So aside from like the usual names wherein people know already what to get from them, like sila JD Kagulangan, sila Malik Diouf and CJ Cancino. Who are one of those unheralded names that you think would have could have a big season, or not even like stats wise, but have a big impact, or similar to what you said about LeBron Nieto, like there's that one game and a stretch in the second half wherein he will have a magnificent impact for UP.
I think you're going to see a lot of big games from Francis Lopez.
Mm-hmm.
One of the strengths of UP's rosters, they have a lot of guys who are tall and athletic and fast and long with long wingspans. The one thing that opposing teams can do against UP is turn the ball over and go cold on offense. Because if you let UP run on the fast break, all those athletes are going to take advantage. They're going to score easily. They have a lot of shooters, and those fast break plays are going to get their crowds up on their feet and energetic. And that's when the momentum of the game can shift. So I think Francis Lopez, considering everything he can do on the court with how quick he is, how athletic he is, how good he is at penetrating, how he can get to the free throw line, I think you're going to see some dominant games from him this season.
Yeah, I mean his high flying prowess would be terrific for the fans. Even non UP fans would be impressed with how he could attack the rim and challenge those big guys when he tries to go for those finger rolls or slams. So it would be exciting to see him. But I'm also curious to know, since you are also a reporter for Rappler and you have some insider information, was it really a legitimate issue that Francis or even Malik might not be eligible for this season, or was that just chismis or just people just saying random things?
So what I had heard was, and this isn't the only thing I got confirmation was that Malik and Francis would be eligible from a board rep. But what I had heard from other people was that the question of their eligibilities weren't even brought up during
Mm.
meetings, and or rather maybe some of the members reflected on it or thought about will they be eligible. I know like there were members of other schools during the off season who were wondering if Malik and LeBron would be eligible this season. But at least to my knowledge, did it ever get to a point where someone brought up the question of their eligibility as a legitimate concern or something to vote on? That never happened. And once that never happened, it was understood that they would be eligible for the season.
Okay, yeah, that's good to hear for the UP fans. And also, I believe that they'll have two of the best seasons for UP. I mean, Malik's gonna be have that be an anchor in the paint with his defense. So even if they have a lot of scores on their guards and wings, it'd be a massive impact on the defensive end. But one guy I'd also want you to expound on is Harold Alarcon, since he won MVP in Phil Oil, and Tyler Teo guested on the game. He also said that he has Harold as one of the breakout players for UAP season 86. So, what do you see in him? What makes him one of the key cogs of this team? Since in high school he was just a superstar role player, as what they termed, I think. But now he's one of the key guys already with the departure of Silla, Carl, Zave, and James.
Harold can really do a lot of things in the basketball court. He's a good defender. He's a solid 3-point shooter for the college level. He can create his own baskets with his dribble penetration and his ball handling. He knows how to move off the ball. He's a smart player. He doesn't force a lot of shots. He'll take good shots, but he doesn't force shots that, you know, he's not a high volume kind of player when it comes to shot attempts. He he also knows how to provide hustle plays. Like even when he doesn't have the ball, he's contributing, multiple effort plays, offensive rebounds. Again, like I said, the defense. Harold is a type of player that he will provide what's necessary to help the team win.
Mhm.
And the fact that he's been with Coach Goldwyn and that coaching staff for a very long time at this point adds to the adds to his strengths with this UP team. And I think we're going to see a big season from him, big responsibility. I don't think a big season means he's going to have like 20, he's going to average like 20 points a game, like what Shawnee did last season for
Yeah,
LaSalle. I don't think that's what we're going to get from Harold again because UP's team is so loaded. But in terms of providing the most efficient contributions in his role, I think Harold is going to be very good.
yeah, I expect also big things from him and big maybe more minutes, larger role because it's what it is third season already for UP and it's I am fan of his game and before I wasn't really familiar heading into his collegiate stint with UP, but it's exciting to see him. But how about with UP? People have been saying that they're the favorites as I mentioned earlier and there's barely any weaknesses on their game. But you seeing them in the preseason, is there any facet of their game where you think that there's still a hole to fill in the at least first round? Maybe they need to fix some things, or is there anything like LaSalle or Ateneo or even NU could capitalize on early on to get a couple of wins from UP because people expect them to win like 11 games or 10 games at the very least in the elimination round.
Hmm, I think UP will. It's really hard to say because we don't know the level of competition until the games really start.
Mm-hmm.
But I think UP definitely has the ability to go maybe one or two in the standings at the end of the elimination round. I think they'll be there at the top. I think they will have a twice to beat advantage once the elimination round comes to an end. But of course, that doesn't always guarantee a championship, right? And that's what their
Yeah.
goal is. They want to win a championship. So let's see how it plays out. Because one nice aspect about the UAP this season is I feel like there are four legitimate contenders to win the championship. Ateneo,
Mm-hmm.
LaSalle, UP, and NU. I would add NU in that list. But
Mm-hmm.
even the four teams below them, UE, FEU, UST, Adamson, are capable of having games where they can potentially pull off an upset. And at the beginning of a UAAP season, all these teams are coming in with confidence. It's only towards the later part of the elimination round where teams start realizing, okay, they're not good enough, and they'll start looking forward to the next season now. But with college players, they play their hearts out, and a bad game could lead to a loss, and that could lead to big repercussions in the elimination round, especially when you only have 14 games in the elimination round. So let's see. I think it's too early to predict, but I do feel that UP will end up with one of the twice to beat advantage seeds.
Yeah, that's a similar prediction I have also for UP. I don't see them losing more than 3 games, honestly. But I don't know. I don't know. Things really do happen, as Coach Tab mentioned, and people didn't expect Adamson or even NU to advance last year, and they made it as the third and fourth seed respectively. So you'll never know. But moving on to the next school that I'd want to talk about is LaSalle. Of course, we're both from LaSalle, and I wanna hear more on your thoughts about the team since it's also a new look because of Coach Topex. Vastly different system. They seem more close with each other now, more tight knit group, and guys like Evan came back as he expressively said that he came back because Coach Topex, the coach. So, what excites you the most for LaSalle, especially after a disappointing finish last year wherein they were only fifth place, despite the talent on the team?
I'm very excited for this LaSalle season. I feel that They have a head coach that the players really trust and the players really like. They have a head coach who is embracing the pressure and the challenge of coaching a team with high expectations like LaSalle. I feel that the team is motivated to live up to the talent that's on the roster. And we saw in the offseason how good the team can be when everything is clicking. They're deep, they have big men, they have a lot of players who have been in the UAP for a while now. I think that's one advantage that LaSalle has over their counterparts in the UAP,
Mhm.
the experience factor, because Evan has been there for a while now in college basketball. Same with Nonoy, same with Michael Phillips, with Benjamin Phillips, even Joaquin Manuel. I know a lot of LaSalle fans are hit and miss when it comes to how much they like Joaquin.
Yeah.
But he has been there for a while too, and there will be a game or two where he can get under the skin of an opponent, a younger opponent, and it could
Mhm.
change the momentum of the game. It was unfortunate that the injury to Deron Mitchell, their supposed
Mhm.
one and done player, will have him not be part of the team this season, because I feel like Deron would have been the one shooter that LaSalle needs, another shooter to space the floor and give them that extra layer on offense that could be beneficial in late game situations. But then you look at the rest of the roster again. CJ Austria is another guy who's been there now for a few seasons. Policarpio is a talented young player. Same with Marasigan. I think Boris Marasigan is one guy that will surprise many players. EJ Goliena is also an exciting young player. Um, the list goes on. They have a lot of players who have UAP experience under their belts. They have a lot of players who have been through the share of Final Four games and elimination round games, and they played a lot of games together in the off season. They've always had the talent. They've always had the potential. What they've needed has been a consistency in the coaching level to bring it together. And at least early on, it seems like Coach Topex is doing that. And by the way, one more guy we haven't mentioned is Kevin Kimbao, who
Oh yeah.
I think he has the potential to be an MVP this season. That's another
Mhm.
guy to be reckoned with. I mean, think about all the names I already mentioned, and then here's another player in Kimbao.
Yeah.
Coach Topex mentioned three things when it comes to their game plan. They want to defend, they want to rebound, and they want to run. And we're going to see a lot of that. And I don't want to predict too much what's going to happen, because we've seen LaSalle seasons go up and down over the last few years.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say is that this is a very, very intriguing Green Archers roster. And
Mhm.
I know what I said about making predictions. It's too early until we see all teams play. But if you did ask me right now, how far would LaSalle get in the UAP season? I think they're making the finals this year.
Hopefully. I mean, I haven't seen them at that stage in so long, and I'm already gonna graduate, and they still haven't reached the final. So yeah, hopefully that happens soon. But I'm curious to know. You mentioned a lot of things about LaSalle, and one weakness they had was their outside shooting, and in the off season was they didn't really have that weakness. I mean, Mark Nonoy had big games in the D League. Kiamba was making a lot of threes, like in the UP elimination round game in Phil Oil. I don't remember how many he made, but he made like six maybe in one
Yeah,
game. Those
6.
were things you don't see in the season 84 and season 85 team. So how do you think LaSalle could maybe do you see LaSalle improving first on outside shooting, or if it's still maybe stagnant or not that exceptional, how do you see them doing something else in order to mitigate that weakness?
Well, I think they don't have a lot of like knockdown shooters, but they don't need to be a high volume shooting team. By the
Mhm.
way, another name we should mention is Bright Nwango, who is their foreign student athlete, who will probably be their big man off the bench, coming in for Mike Phillips. And that's another guy who's been around for a while now.
Yeah. Mhm.
They have numerous strengths. They can score inside with Phillips, with Kiambao, with Nwanko. They have a talented point guard who knows how to control the pace of the game in Nelly. Nonoy does have his games where he's ineffective, but when there are games where he can catch fire, he can be deadly. There's a lot of ways for this team. Goliena's another penetrator worth noting. Policarpio's another guy who can penetrate. So they have a lot of talent on the roster who can score in many ways. I think the shooting will be something they have to figure out. That's why I'm saying that Mitchell being there would have been good because
Yeah,
he was a good 3-point shooter. But they can still find other ways to win. And particularly with their defense too, with Phillips manning the paint, with Noanko coming off the bench. Benjamin Phillips is another guy. Maybe he's 3-point stroke. We've seen him develop a 3-point stroke. If he could add more to that this season, that could be really helpful. So let's see how it goes.
yeah. Talking about about the defense of LaSalle, I'm not sure if Kiambao said this in a podcast with Nico Rocha in his podcast that they weren't. People thought that Coach Manong Derek would be like a good defensive coach, but in season 85, I think LaSalle was one of the worst in defense last season. I'm not sure if that's correct or I just it's a mistakenly heard that in the podcast. But yeah, but in short, they didn't really win a lot of games, and in the end, they really lost it. But I wanted to ask more about the press because Coach Topex does a lot of pressing and trapping. So how do you think LaSalle should also balance that they don't press or trap too much? Because for a team like UP or Ateneo that's high IQ, maybe they could break it easily and it could result to open baskets or open layups on the other end.
Well, last season, LaSalle allowed the most points in the league. Part of that was impacted by the fact that they were playing at such a high pace. I do believe though that defensively we won't see them rely so much on the press. I feel like they will have counters to different offensive schemes that their opponents throw at them. You might see some drop defense, you might see some switching, you might see them trap and look to recover. So we're going to see because again, the off season was a few months ago at this point, and after the off season ends, teams add more to what they want to do because then they have their overseas training, overseas pickup games. So let's see how they perform. I think the first few games will give us an idea. It is very interesting that after their opening game against FEU, they have a major test right away against Ateneo a few days later. That Ateneo game, I'm very curious to see how LaSalle performs, what kind of adjustments Topex will make in game, and what kind of different layers to the offense as well that they will try to put on the court. Will they try to make opponents play their style of play? Will they try to counter what the opposition is doing? There's a lot to consider.
Yeah, hopefully they're able to find find that mix because I know I hope that they really do have the momentum by round two because I don't expect them to win like the first 7 games or sweep the first round right away with a new coach. So hopefully things go well. But among the remaining teams that we have in the UAP, I mean others may not be familiar with the players, maybe only like the top two, top three players from the remaining schools. But from among the remaining schools, what intriguing storylines are you looking out for? Since, yeah, as you mentioned, there's still no games yet, so we don't know how strong or how formidable these teams are. So, yeah, what are you looking out for in general?
I think NU's a team that can be really good. I feel like NU has the best depth at the guard position in the UAAP with Baclaan, Enriquez, Humamoy, Don Lim, and LA Casinillo. Think that the an offensive weapon in the wings is one of NU's weak points, though. But they do have a lot of bigs also: Palacielo, Padrones, Omar John. They do have Michael Malonzo and Jake Figueroa as well. And I think how good those two guys can be for NU will determine how far they go. But would it surprise me if NU wins a UAP championship? I would say no, because NU is really good, and they did beat UP in the Pinoy Liga semis, which
Yeah.
was a thriller of an overtime game, and they almost beat Ateneo in the finals of that tournament too. So I think those four teams, UP, Ateneo, and U LaSalle, are the title contenders. I will say too that UE, UST, Adamson, and FEU will be noteworthy teams too. I feel like UE this season will have a foreign student athlete, which has been a presence they've been missing the last few seasons. So that's interesting. Adamson, the big question is when will Jerome come back, and how can the team, will the team sink or swim until Jerome comes back is another question because they were a Final Four team with Jerome last season. And I think if Jerome can play close to where he was playing last season, Adamson will still be formidable. FEU, there's a lot of talent in the team. Cyrus Torres, Patrick Sleet, Cholo Anonuevo. My two questions with FEU is how quickly will they adjust to the system of Coach Denok Miranda, and how will they do it in-game adjustments under new head coach? And can their big man Mohamed Fati be effective on the court and stay on the court, find a way to stay out of foul trouble? UST, what will it be like under Coach Pido? I don't think they're expecting to make the Final Four right away this season, but can they
Mhm.
start laying the groundwork of a competitive team once the season 87 players come in the following season? That's going to be interesting. Nick Cabanero, of course, always exciting to watch in UST. And one more. So, yeah, those are the four teams: UE, Adamson, FEU, and UST. They have the potential to upset the top four teams, which I think are the top four in my opinion, on any given day. And I think we're going to see a lot of games this season that goes down the wire, close fourth quarter games, which is going to be exciting for all the fans.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you again, Naveen, for joining me here on the podcast. I hope the fans are more excited after listening to the episode. And before you go, is it okay if you make predictions, like of Mythical Five predictions? Do you have any like predictions for the Mythical Five?
Well, I think my MVP will be Michael Phillips for the
Oh,
season.
okay,
I think
yeah,
Michael will win MVP because we have to remember that when it comes to awards, the UAP uses a statistical formula
yeah,
that,
yeah.
yes, a statistical formula to determine statistical points for awards. So I think all the rebounding and the blocks, in addition to his scoring, will help Phillips out. And also, each win has a certain amount of bonus points. And if LaSalle can win 10, 11 games, that's going to help his case. Rookie of the year, I have to double check if LeBron Lopez is eligible, but from my understanding, it has to be a player that comes straight out of high school. So if
Oh,
that's
yeah,
the case,
true.
I think it might be SJ Moore because he will get a lot of playing time and touches for UST right away.
Hmm.
Final four will be the four teams I mentioned:
Yeah.
UP, Ateneo, LaSalle, and U. I think LaSalle makes the finals against UP, and I think UP wins the championship.
Okay. Hopefully not. But then, yeah, I think yeah, UP would be the favorite. So yeah, thanks again, Naveen. And before you go, is it okay if we take a picture?
Yeah, of course, man.
Okay, I'll take it from here. One, two, three. Okay, thank you again, Naveen, for joining me on the podcast. And yeah, see you soon again on the games. And hopefully, I'll have you on the pod again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Diego.
Thank you. Thank you.
See ya.